By the 4th of July, more than 150 million Americans are going to be living under a heat dome. Not warm, not uncomfortable. A heat dome, the kind that stalls for days, refuses to break overnight, and turns the air itself into something you have to push through. I want to walk you through exactly what is coming, and I want to start at the end of the story, because that is where you need to begin paying attention. Here is the sequence. Today and tomorrow, a volatile storm corridor is firing across the central United States. Late this weekend, that storm corridor collides with the western edge of a building ridge, and the first round of damaging Derecho potential thunderstorms erupts. By Monday, the ridge locks in. By Wednesday, July 1st, the Weather Prediction Center puts the core of the heat dome centered over St. Louis, and its effects run from the Great Lakes all the way down to Texas. By Saturday, July 4th, the ridge has shifted so that it is centered near Chicago, and from Wisconsin to the Gulf Coast to the eastern seaboard, widespread 90s are the expectation, not the exception. That is 7 days from right now. I am going to take you through it step by step, starting with the storm threat that is active this weekend, and then I am going to show you the climate engine driving all of it. Because the heat dome does not exist in isolation. There is something much bigger happening beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean right now, something that is rewriting what the rest of this summer is going to feel like, and that is the part of this forecast I really want you to stay for. I am Arthur. If you are new here, this is Sky Space Lab, where the data drives the story, not the other way around. Hit subscribe and you will never miss an update when the pattern shifts like this one just did. Now, let us get into it. This weekend, the threat is real, and it is active. The Storm Prediction Center has highlighted a risk of severe thunderstorms across portions of the northern plains into the Ohio Valley for today, Friday, June 26th, with the threat continuing through Saturday. The Weather Prediction Center's short-range discussion, issued just this morning, flags a slight risk of excessive rainfall from northeastern Oklahoma all the way east to central West Virginia. That is not a narrow strip. That is a broad corridor where training convection could drop 2 to 4 inches in areas already saturated from recent storms. Today, the highest-end severe threat is centered across the northern plains. A frontal boundary is pushing east, and ahead of it, we have genuine tornado potential. The SPC is flagging a zone from eastern North Dakota down through South Dakota, where the atmosphere is uncapped this afternoon. Precipitable water values are running 1 to 1.5 standard deviations above the mean. That means moisture is not the limiting factor. Wind shear is in place. If discrete supercells get going before the line consolidates, you could be looking at significant tornadoes this afternoon, and the window for that is 3 to 7 this evening. That window matters. After 7 or 8 p.m., storms will begin to upscale into a line, and the primary threat shifts to damaging straight-line winds, gusts exceeding 60 to 70 miles per hour along the squall line as it presses east into Minnesota overnight. Here is who needs to watch this the most today. If you're in Bismarck, Fargo, Aberdeen, or anywhere along Interstate 90 in the Dakotas, you're in the zone for late afternoon supercells before the line arrives. Omaha and Sioux Falls are in the severe wind corridor for tonight. Minneapolis, you'll see the line arrive sometime in the pre-dawn hours Saturday. Saturday shifts the primary threat south and east. The SPC's extended outlook flags additional severe weather across the mid-Atlantic on Saturday, as the frontal boundary becomes semi-stationary. What that means is storms will not move efficiently. They will sit, reload, and drop heavy rainfall over the same areas. Cities like Columbus, Pittsburgh, Knoxville, and Charlotte should be watching Saturday afternoon and evening closely. The flooding concern is as real as the wind and hail threat on Saturday. And then Saturday night into Sunday, the atmosphere is going to do something that very few summer setups produce. A mid-level jet streak rounds the base of the western trough and emerges across the northern plains. The SPC noted this in their Day 4 to 8 outlook, a lee cyclone deepening over eastern Colorado, moving north into the northern plains. With an uncapped air mass and very strong instability ahead of that surface low, you have all the ingredients for an organized severe weather event on Sunday and into Monday. The northern plains does not get a break this weekend. If anything, Sunday could produce the more memorable event of the 2 days for North Dakota and into northwestern Minnesota. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to know who is in this storm corridor today and this weekend. Are you watching the sky? Now here is where the story changes, because everything I just described, the storms, the frontal passages, the active weekend, is actually the edge of the picture. The centre of this forecast is what happens starting Monday and continuing through Independence Day and beyond. And to understand it, I need to tell you about two forces that are converging right now in a way I have not seen this early in summer in years. The first is the heat dome itself. According to AccuWeather senior meteorologist Joe Lundberg, the core of the heat dome will be centered over the Ohio Valley, the Middle Mississippi Valley, and the Tennessee Valley for much of next week. The ridge axis, the spine of the high-pressure system, that puts it near Chicago by July 4th. When the ridge is that far north and that strong, it does not just bring hot temperatures, it suppresses cloud development. It brings sinking air that compresses and warms as it descends, and it stalls. A 5,940-metre height contour is what the models are producing. Not quite record level, but well into the territory where surface temperatures have no ceiling during the afternoon hours. Cities like Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, Dallas, and Nashville could all see their highest temperatures of the year in the next 7 days. Columbia, South Carolina, and Tallahassee, Florida are being flagged by the National Weather Service as potential daily record breakers, possibly reaching into the low triple digits. But here is what makes this one different from a typical summer heat wave: the humidity. The Gulf waters are channeling moisture northward into the midsection of the country, and that moisture is not going anywhere once the ridge locks in. The Weather Prediction Center's extended discussion this morning described it plainly: a significant dangerous heat wave expected for the central to eastern United States next week. Heat index values are going to be the real story, not air temperature, what it actually feels like when you walk outside. Let me be specific, because vague heat warnings do not help anyone. By Wednesday, July 1st, St. Louis could be looking at a heat index touching 110 degrees. Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Louisville, the same range. Nashville, Birmingham, Atlanta, well above 100. The Northeast is next. As the ridge expands eastward through the second half of next week, the I-95 corridor from Washington to Boston will see temperatures surge into the 90s, with dew points in the 60s and low 70s. The kind of heat that kills is the kind that does not release overnight, and this system is expected to stagnate, and then, riding the northern rim of that heat dome, because this is how summer setups work, a ring of fire. The Weather Prediction Center specifically flagged this. Large complexes of thunderstorms could form and travel along the northern edge of the heat dome this weekend into early next week, with derecho potential. AccuWeather called out a round or two of severe thunderstorms with damaging winds and flooding downpours from the Dakotas to the northern Mississippi Valley and Great Lakes late this weekend into early next week. Crop damage in Minnesota, similar to what happened in mid-June, is being cited as a possible outcome. That is not a casual comparison. That is the forecast team reaching for historical analogues, because the setup is familiar in a dangerous way. Have you experienced a derecho before? Let me know in the comments, and tell me where you are, because the communities at highest risk this week are in areas that have had a relatively quiet stretch. Now, I need to take you to the thing I have been building toward, because the heat dome tells you what the next 10 days feel like. But the El Nino, and I want to be precise about what I'm about to tell you, the El Nino tells you what the rest of this summer and this winter are going to mean. El Nino conditions are officially present. NOAA's Climate Prediction Center issued an El Nino advisory on June 11th. That is the formal declaration. Conditions are here. But what they said next is what should have your attention. There is a 63% chance that this event becomes what NOAA calls a very strong El Nino by winter. Sea surface temperature anomalies exceeding 2 degrees Celsius above average in the Nino 3.4 monitoring region of the equatorial Pacific. 2 degrees is the threshold NOAA uses to declare a super El Nino. The latest weekly Nino 3.4 index, centered on June 17th, climbed to plus 1.7 degrees Celsius. That was 9 days ago. The trend is not leveling off. It is accelerating. The IRI Columbia University Ensemble, 24 dynamical and statistical models run in concert, assigns 13 of 24 members to a very strong El Nino by September, October, and November. The ECMWF long-range ensemble projects sea surface temperature anomalies reaching plus 3 degrees Celsius by December. The World Meteorological Organization has flagged a 90% or greater probability that El Nino conditions persist through at least November. Let me put that in context you can feel. There have been 5 super El Nino events since 1950. The last one was 2015 through 2016. Before that, 1997 and 98. which brought catastrophic flooding to California, drought to Australia and southern Africa, and fundamentally reorganized global weather for 18 months. The ECMWF and NOAA's CFSV2 model are now projecting that this event, if it verifies, could rival or exceed the strongest El Niño in the past 155 years of modern records. Severe Weather Europe described the subsurface heat pulse driving this as a massive downwelling Kelvin wave, with anomalies of plus 8 degrees Celsius at depths between 50 and 250 meters, running warmer than the 1997 event at the same stage. This is one of the most aggressive El Niño developments I have seen in the satellite era. What does this mean for the United States right now, this summer? The NOAA Climate Prediction Center's summer outlook puts above-average temperatures across most of the lower 48. The IRI Columbia plume assigns a 98% probability of El Niño conditions through at least early 2027. For the United States in summer, a developing El Niño means the subtropical jet becomes increasingly active. More storms funneled into the southern tier of the country, more moisture channeled into the Gulf Coast, and an amplified western ridge that drives the heat dome pattern we're watching build right now. AccuWeather's Paul Pasterlock put it clearly. Severe weather picks up in June and July with near to above average tornadoes from the plains to the east coast. Here is the mechanism. The Western Pacific is already lighting up with multiple typhoons. The ECMWF Global Track Forecast shows 2 or more long-track typhoons expected in coming weeks. Those typhoon recurvature events generate teleconnections, pressure wave signals that propagate thousands of miles across the atmosphere. The Weather.com analysis earlier this month noted that Typhoon Genmi, east of Japan, set off a Pacific jet extension, and they called it one of the strongest Pacific jet extensions seen in the month of June. That extension set up the trough and ridge pattern we're now watching dominate the country. This is not a coincidence. Typhoon activity in the Western Pacific is part of how El Niño rewires the planet's weather machine, and we are watching it happen in real time. There is a climate change layer here that I cannot skip. A December 2025 study found that super El Niño events can drive sudden climate regime shifts in both temperatures and precipitation, and that this effect is increasing in a warming world. Last year was the planet's 3rd warmest year on record, and El Niño had not even started yet. The combination of a strong baseline warming trend plus a potentially record-strong El Niño means the statistical ceiling for summer heat records is not where it used to be. Phoenix hit 115 degrees in May, the earliest extreme heat on record there, and that happened under essentially neutral ENSO conditions. Imagine what a super El Niño adds on top of that baseline as we move into August and September. Now, the Atlantic hurricane season. This is where the El Niño actually works in your favour if you're on the Gulf or East Coast. NOAA is forecasting a below-normal Atlantic season. 9 to 11 named storms, 4 to 7 hurricanes, 1 to 3 majors. The IRI Columbia ensemble is in agreement. The vertical wind shear that El Niño injects into the Caribbean and the main development region suppresses Atlantic tropical development. Colorado State University's current forecast is similarly modest. We are in the dog days of summer when Atlantic activity often tries to pick up. But as of today, the ECMWF 15-day ensemble tracks show a near ghost town in the Atlantic basin. No significant development is expected through mid-July. The main development region, from the Lesser Antilles to the African coast, is running near or below average in sea surface temperatures. The El Niño is already doing its job there. For tropical watchers, the real action this season has been and will continue to be in the Eastern Pacific, where El Niño supercharges development. Multiple systems are forecast in coming weeks. Mexico and Central America need to be watching the Eastern Pacific carefully. As for the Gulf and Western Caribbean, the pattern this week and next keeps shear elevated enough to prevent meaningful development, even if the Gulf waters are quite warm. Monitor, but do not panic. The WPC discussion from this morning also noted something that I think deserves more attention than it is getting. The upper-level trough that is driving the weekend storm threat is going to be reinforced, not weakened. Reinforced through next week by a series of additional shortwaves diving down from the north. That means on the western side of the country, from the Pacific Northwest through the Rockies and Intermountain West, temperatures are going to run 15 to 20 degrees below normal at the same time the east is cooking. The NWS office in Billings flagged the possibility of high-elevation snow in the northern Rockies by Saturday night into Sunday. Snow in late June. Meanwhile, Dallas and Nashville are pushing toward 100 degrees. That is the kind of atmospheric split that I want you to visualize. Two air masses pulling the country in opposite directions, and a volatile storm corridor ripping along the boundary between them. AccuWeather described this as a rare three-part split in the nation's weather. Extreme heat locked over the east, a cold and unsettled pattern dominating the west, and a volatile storm zone in between. That storm zone is where the severe weather threat lives for the next several days, and that storm zone is also where the derecho risk concentrates, because that is exactly how derechos form. They ride the temperature gradient, fueled by the instability on the warm side, organized by the shear on the cold side, and they move fast. I want to talk about what a derecho event could mean in practical terms for the northern plains and upper Midwest. The GFS ensemble runs from yesterday evening was suggesting that the organized convective complex forming this weekend could produce wind gusts exceeding 75 miles per hour along the leading edge. That is the threshold the SPC now uses for a level 1 conditional intensity group wind event. If the complex stays organized longer than models suggest, and model history on these summer derechos skews toward underestimating their longevity, we could be looking at gusts pushing 85 miles per hour or more in isolated locations. Power outages on a widespread scale. That matters even more this week because the heat dome arrives right behind the storm. Losing power on a Sunday, knowing the heat index is going to hit 105 by Wednesday, that is not a comfortable sequence. If you are in the Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa or Michigan corridor, I want you to check your backup plan this weekend. Water, charged devices, cooling center locations. Have that conversation before Saturday night. Now let me close the loop on something I opened earlier. I told you the Nino 3.4 index was at plus 1.7 as of June 17th, 9 days ago. The trend on that index has not flattened. It has continued climbing based on the latest satellite data from NOAA's buoy network in the equatorial Pacific. The subsurface thermal anomaly driving this, that plus 8 degree Kelvin wave at 50 to 250 meters depth, is still propagating eastward along the equator. When that subsurface heat reaches the surface layers near the South American coast, it amplifies the surface signal further. The models are seeing it. The ECMWF ensemble, the NOAA CFS V2, and the Australian Bureau of Meteorology model are all in rare agreement, not just on El Niño developing, but on its intensity trajectory. The NOAA Climate Prediction Center called a Super El Niño the single most likely outcome for late 2026. Not one of several likely outcomes, the single most likely outcome. That language does not come from the CPC lightly. They updated their ENSO alert status to an El Niño advisory on June 11th, moving from watch. The next step above advisory is an El Niño watch for extreme or super category events. Based on what the models are currently showing, that step could come before the end of July. What does a super El Niño do to the United States storm pattern in the back half of the year? The subtropical jet becomes dramatically enhanced. We are talking about a persistent river of wind energy across the southern tier of the country. Rainfall anomalies for the Gulf Coast and Florida are historically above average, sometimes dramatically so. The western mountain snowpack in winter gets a big signal from Super El Niño events, and the derecho season across the Central Plains and Midwest. The IRI Columbia analysis puts Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and southern Minnesota in the most likely derecho corridor this summer, and that matches every forecast signal I am seeing right now. What is happening this week is not just a heat dome and some storms. It is the opening act of a summer that is being shaped by the most powerful oceanic temperature anomaly in a century and a half of modern records, if the forecast verifies. We are going to be watching this every single day. Something I have not said yet, and I should say it now because the models updated while I was putting this video together. The Euro 12Z run from this morning has actually trended the ridge slightly stronger and slightly more persistent than the run from last night. That is meaningful. When the Euro and GFS both trend in the same direction across consecutive runs, that is a signal worth paying attention to. The Euro is showing the 5,940 meter contour extended further northeast than the previous run, which means Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City are now more firmly inside the core heat zone by Wednesday and Thursday of next week than they were yesterday. This is still a fluid situation, and I will have refined numbers tomorrow, but the trend in the models is toward a more intense and more widespread event, not less. The question I am getting most often right now is whether this heat wave will break before the 4th of July or push through it. And the honest answer is, the models do not break it before Independence Day. The WPC extended forecast, valid through Friday, July 3rd, explicitly describes a sprawling upper high, resulting in increasingly dangerous heat and humidity through much of next week and possibly beyond into the 4th of July holiday weekend. Possibly beyond. That is what the WPC wrote. Not me. The data is pointing in one direction. If you're planning outdoor 4th of July events and you're in the Midwest or Eastern United States, you need to factor in a heat index that could exceed 105 degrees in multiple cities during the afternoon hours of the holiday. That is a serious planning consideration. The NUS Heat Risk tool will be your best friend between now and July 4th. Check it every morning for your specific area. I also want to address the fire situation because it is connected to everything I have described. On the western side of that atmospheric split, where the cold trough is digging, you do not get relief from fire weather. The WPC short-range discussion from this morning flagged an extremely critical fire weather risk over parts of the central Great Basin and southwest for today and through the weekend. The trough brings wind but not significant moisture. Utah is dealing with a large destructive fire right now, and the wind threat from the passing trough could intensify fire spread across Utah and neighboring states this weekend. Powerful winds will accompany the cooldown in the west, and those powerful winds blowing across dry, drought-stressed terrain are exactly the wrong combination for fire weather. So the western United States is simultaneously cooler than normal in temperature and extremely dangerous from a fire standpoint. The eastern United States is heading into its most dangerous heat event of the summer, and in between, the storm corridor where derechos are possible. This is what a highly amplified upper-level pattern looks like in practice. This is one of the most geographically extreme late June setups I have seen in recent years, and the climate engine powering it, the developing Super El Nino, has not even come close to peaking yet. El Nino typically reaches its maximum intensity during the Northern Hemisphere winter. If the ECMWF and NOAA ensemble guidance verifies, we are heading toward a fall and winter that could genuinely challenge the record books. The story of this summer is just beginning. I want to spend a few more minutes on the 7-day specifics, because I know a lot of you want the day-by-day. So here is the sequence as clearly as I can state it right now. Today, Friday, June 26th, the severe weather threat is active across the northern plains. Discrete supercells possible from the northern Dakotas into central South Dakota, 3 to 7 this afternoon. Tornado threat is real in that window. After 7 p.m., line consolidation brings a wind threat from Fargo south, through Sioux Falls, and east into Minnesota overnight. Flooding possible from northeast Oklahoma east to central West Virginia, as training convection develops along the frontal boundary. Saturday, June 27th, the front becomes semi-stationary across the Ohio Valley into the Tennessee Valley and central Appalachians. The flooding threat migrates east. Cities from Columbus to Pittsburgh to Knoxville and Charlotte face heavy rainfall from slow-moving training storms. Severe thunderstorm threat across portions of the mid-Atlantic for the afternoon hours. Simultaneously, the northern plains sees another round of severe weather Sunday morning as that deepening Colorado low tracks north. The energy map does not quiet down between now and Sunday. Sunday, June 28th through Monday, June 29th, the Lee cyclone deepens and moves north into the northern plains. The SPC's Day 4 to 8 discussion from June 25th was explicit. A very favourable environment and an uncapped air mass by Sunday evening across eastern North Dakota and into northwestern Minnesota. Severe storms Sunday afternoon to Sunday night, with organised convective system potential overnight into Monday. The mid-level jet streak emerges from the trough base and arrives over the northern plains. This is the setup that the models are handling carefully because of its derecho potential. I will have a live updated track on this for you Saturday morning. Monday, June 29th through Tuesday, June 30th, the pattern transitions. The upper ridge begins to build aggressively over the eastern half of the country. Severe storm potential shifts to the periphery, the Great Lakes, the upper Midwest, and into the northeast as the frontal boundary gets absorbed by the advancing ridge. Behind it, the heat builds with no interruption. GFS and Euro both show a pronounced subsidence inversion, developing Monday evening that effectively caps storm development in the interior for days at a time. July 1st through July 3rd, the ridge is locked in and dangerous. Ohio Valley, Mississippi Valley, Tennessee Valley are the core zones. Heat indices 100 to 110 degrees in many locations. Overnight lows that barely drop into the upper 70s in some cities. No release valve. The WPC explicitly notes the heat may push beyond the holiday weekend. National Weather Service offices will be issuing heat advisories and excessive heat warnings in a cascade from Tuesday forward. Watch your NWS office products daily. July 4th. Right now, the best guidance puts the heat dome centered near Chicago. 90 degrees or above from Wisconsin to the Gulf Coast. If you're at a fireworks display outdoors on Independence Day, the heat index may be over 100 degrees for many of the largest fireworks events in the country. This is not a reason to cancel your plans. It is a reason to hydrate aggressively, avoid standing in direct sun during the late afternoon hours, and know your limits. The Euro and GFS are not showing a significant frontal system breaking this pattern before approximately July 6th or 7th. A possible trough ejection from the Pacific Northwest may bring some relief to the northern tier by the first week of July, but the southeastern Ohio Valley may not get meaningful relief until mid-July at the earliest. Super El Nino pattern, western ridge, eastern heat, storm corridor in between, and it holds. Before you close this video, I want to ask you one last thing directly. Think about the oldest person you know, a grandparent, a neighbor, someone in an upper floor apartment with limited air conditioning. The heat that is coming for next week is the kind that does not announce itself loudly. It just accumulates, core body temperature rising hour by hour. The people who die in heat events often do not realize they are in danger. You are watching this forecast because you pay attention. Not everyone does. Share this video with someone who needs it. If you are in Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, Nashville, Indianapolis, Columbus, Charlotte, or anywhere along the eastern seaboard, check on someone this week. Have water ready. Know where the nearest cooling center is before Monday morning, not after. That is the forecast for today, June 26th. Tomorrow, I will have the updated weekend storm threat timeline, the latest model consensus on the heat dome's peak intensity and geographic center, and I will be tracking any new data from the equatorial Pacific on the El Nino development. If you are not subscribed, now is the moment to do it. The pattern does not slow down from here.